Eric Adams is the current mayor of New York City right now. And the city finds ourselves in the midst of a bit of a problem with the immigrants illegally entering the country. Many newspapers and pundits on TV will describe these individuals as asylum seekers. They are not. I repeat, they are not. These are mainly males who are economic migrants traveling to this country because they can make more money here than they ever could where they came from. That is the situation. And so Eric Adams finds himself, beating the drum, trying to get the Biden administration to, the most recent thing is he's trying to get the Biden administration to get rid of some red tape. So apparently, if you are an immigrant, a recent immigrant, an asylum seeker or whatever, and you come to this country, you actually have to wait a period before you are allowed to work. I think it's like 6 months, something like that. And he's asking Joe Biden to kind of cut the red tape to, speed the process up so that these people can work as soon as possible. Now, for Eric, this is driven primarily because he wants to lessen the economic burden. He's been going around recently talking about how it's going to cost the city, $13 billion to take care of these migrants. And so for him, this is driven by politics and economics, right? So the economics are obvious. Hey, I want to get these people off my payroll. So now let's get to the politics. The politics are the fact that what he needs to be doing is trying to find a way to end this stupid ass right to shelter law that we have in New York City. Number one, the right to shelter law is applied to citizens. These individuals are not citizens of these United States. So now I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, what's going on here really? You have individuals coming into the country illegally for economic opportunity. They are being shipped from Texas mainly, although some are coming from Florida and some are coming from Arizona, but the bulk of them are coming from Texas to New York City and other liberal cities. And because New York City has a right to shelter law on the books, we are in a situation now where we have to find shelter for these individuals, which means they are taking over the shelters that should be reserved for our citizens. They are being put in hotels, which you would ask, why wasn't this the case for our citizens? We're building outside of shelters for these people. And instead of trying to push back on the right to shelter nonsense, he's trying to ease his economic burden, not realizing, or maybe he does, and he just don't give a fuck, by allowing these individuals to work. You are incentivizing more immigration illegally to this country and as a whole, but New York City in general. You can't reward this bad behavior. And yes, it's bad behavior. A sad story doesn't mean that what you're doing is no longer bad or illegal. If I was homeless tomorrow and I robbed the bank to feed my family, that judge is going to send my black ass to jail, as she should, because just because I have a economic situation, this does not mean the rules do not apply. The rules still apply. We live in a country and we have to abide by certain rules and regulations. Otherwise, you just don't have a country. So I hope Joe Biden does not cut this red tape, but even exploring this issue further, right? Because that's the surface. Like, this is the problem happening right now. But we've had an immigration problem for decades. Everyone's pretending like this is a difficult problem to solve when it is not. A couple of months ago, I had on Mark Krikorian, who's a immigration whiz, so to speak. Like, he studies the issue and he talks about how ways we can combat the problem easily. And it makes you wonder, is it really this hard to control your own border? Democrats will make you believe that it is damn near impossible to come up with a solution to border control. They only want to talk about, the beautiful stories of the of the immigrants and how their children are dreamers and they dreamed of a life. They dreamed. And Republicans like to pretend like they care. But we've had Republican presidents. We've had a Republican-controlled Congress, Senate. There hasn't been much done with the illegal immigration issue. So now I have to wonder, okay, well, how come no one really wants to solve this problem? And when you think about it, there's two individuals or two groups that benefit from illegal immigration. The first one is obvious, which is corporations. The second group would be politicians. The corporations benefit from illegal immigration and just immigration in general because they want competition amongst the labor pool. Do you remember during COVID or right after COVID, like around that 2020, 2021 time frame where you had raises going on in places of the country where there was not a raise for like 20, 30 years? Yeah, southern states that were offering a $15 wage to work fast food or work, at a restaurant or work, wherever for the first time in decades. That came about because you had a situation where there were so many job openings, but not enough people willing to work the jobs. And so corporations had to get competitive for the labor. That is what happens when you have more job openings than you do people who are either available or willing to work those jobs. It's why Bernie Sanders, who is a democratic socialist, was also someone who believed in having strict border control, because as Bernie being a socialist who believes in, a broad social safety net, all of that stuff, you can't have a broader social safety net and nonstop immigration. You just can't do it. It's not feasible economically. So that's why corporations are pro-immigration. The reason politicians are pro-immigration is because they get their money from corporations. The corporations pay for the super PACs. The corporations help get these guys elected. The corporations provide them economic opportunities after their time in politics. That is the explanation as to why, for many politicians, they have a kind of, I don't really care about immigration. They'll give some lip service to it, but there's no serious conversation of robustly tackling this problem because they get paid by the corporations. Now, what's scary is that some politicians, there are also another handful of politicians. I would throw the Democratic politicians into this category. These are individuals who actually believe in allowing these individuals in the country. So they don't want to solve the problem because they actually would love for more people to come illegally to this country. I would throw your AOCs in this category. I would throw a lot of your Congressional Black Caucus in this category. I would throw your Joe Bidens, your Kamala Harris's, these individuals in this category. These people view it as kind of some, moral imperative for them to not have border control. It is cruel to have border control. We can't send these people back to where they came from. That's how they view the issue. And that's why this problem is not being solved. It's frustrating for me. It really is. You look around and you watch foreigners, people who are not citizens, being put in hotel rooms when you have to walk around the city and watch people who are citizens sleeping on the street. And I'm not a Democrat. So for me personally, I would prefer for us to kind of, put a loophole. I think there are too many social programs right now. I think many of these programs are abused. I think they are used by people who don't need them. And so for me, I would love to to scale down many of these entitlement programs, but they exist. And so if I'm being forced to pay for these via taxes, I at least would like for my taxes to go to people who are actually citizens. A country owes its citizens. Remember, that famous quote, don't ask what the country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. No, I think if the country can ask of me tax dollars, which they take from my check, mandatory military service as a man, right? Like if some shit breaks out, I can be compelled to fight. Then I think that's good grounds for me to ask for, hey, what can y'all do for me? It's a give and take relationship. And as I close this episode out, I really want black men to hear what I'm saying right now, for real. Because this issue should speak to us in ways in which it might look past many other groups, right? And actually, this should be black men and white men in general, really. These two demographics. But let me focus on black men. And the reason why I'm focusing on black men is because unlike black women, black men are not going to college at the same rates. We're not graduating from school at the same rates. We don't work, white collar jobs at the same rates. For many black men, we are blue collar workers. We are labor workers. We are what you would deem, what society deems, low skill workers. Our livelihood is threatened the most with immigration in general. Like before we even get to illegal immigration, just immigration in general. Low skill labor is the most at risk with immigration. And so our survival economically, our political survival, because these people can't vote that come in this country because they're not citizens, but their children can in 18 years. Look at how fast the Hispanic population has grown, which means look at how fast the Hispanic political power has grown. Their numbers haven't grown this much just because they've been popping out babies more than anybody else. Now, are they more fertile than most groups by the number of kids? True. But these huge gains they've made is because when you have a bunch of people who are in this country illegally, yes, they cannot vote, but when they have children on this soil, their children can. So you have 10 million people coming in, keep track. They each have 2 kids, 18 years. That's some political power right there. There's the economic disenfranchisement of the black male competing for jobs. There's the political disenfranchisement of the black male because of these various groups that are able to vote against our interest. And there's the cultural disenfranchisement that happens as well. Culture changes all the time. American culture today is not the American culture of 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And for many people, that's a good thing. As a black man in America, I think there are absolutely positives of the change in American culture today versus 100 years ago. But what will be the changes from today, 100 years from now, when you have a country that doesn't have a shared language? What happens when you are a part of a group of people, black Americans, who we all primarily speak English, and you have various other minority groups who are coming into the country who, they speak English, but they speak Spanish. They speak English, but they speak Mandarin. They speak English, but they speak Russian. I saw a tweet from somebody the other day that said, in Florida, you can't even get a job if you're not bilingual, really. Makes sense. And we're not forcing these people to, speak English. No. Businesses are greedy. And so if you get an influx of people who don't speak no English, you're not going to demand that they learn English to do commerce in your community. No. You're just going to find people who speak Spanish to do commerce with them, thus disenfranchising the English-speaking worker. And who is at the bottom of that totem pole? The black man. And that is why I'm concerned. All of these black politicians in Congress, Congressional Black Caucus, Al Sharpton, I don't know if they have our interest in mind. I don't. There's a big class issue there. They're not going to be displaced. These individuals are not going to be in their communities. Many of them don't live around black people anyway. And I'm not even getting on them for that, because if I have money, I probably might move to the whitest place in America as well. But you gotta know, this is where you land. We have to know this is the current political landscape. So this migrant crisis ain't good news for us, man. No one is talking about it. You have people who believe in this black and brown coalition, and I'm not anti-brown people, of course, but I'm not under this belief that, I should be in favor of a black and brown coalition more than I should be in favor of a black and white one. That might be the podcast for tomorrow on, who is the black man's true political ally. But you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not under this belief that, that there's this natural allyship between Black Americans and immigrant groups who come to this country who just happen to be closer in our pigmentation than white Americans who have been in this country with us for decades and decades. So I'm gonna close this out. I don't even have an ending point here. I think this is bad news, man. I think this migrant crisis is the beginning of. It is one of many red flags that we should be paying attention to as Americans in general, but especially if you black, and in particularly if you are a black man.